Tensor rings are the creation of Slim Sperling and Bill Reed in the early 1990s. They found that when copper wire is drawn and annealed or heated, the copper atoms form a crystalline array resulting in wire with polarity. In other words, the wire has a direction with a positive and a negative end. And when a length of wire is joined to itself, there's an energetic circuit that results with some interesting properties that emerge. Now, this all began when Slim and Bill were working with someone in their lab who could see energy, much like those who can see auras. And they had this large electrical cable in their lab, and when they drew that together and joined the ends, there was this unexpected column of light that shot out from one side of the loop that this person who could see energy saw, and it actually shocked them. Looking deeper into all of this, they discovered that a single looped wire creates a flow of non-electrical energy through the loop, so that there's a resulting positive and negative side to the loop. But when they folded that wire in half, now remember the wire has polarity, so when the wire was folded in half, both directions of the energetic flow were representative. When they did that, clipping the ends so that they could join those ends together, they noticed that there was a flow of energy both directions through the loop. And when they twisted the wire, before they joined those ends back together again, the twisting somehow negated the negative side of the energy so that it was a positive form of energy that went both directions through that resulting loop. The more they worked with this energy, the more they were convinced that the energy that flowed through the ring was more like life force. Other words that have been used for this through the ages are chi, prana, and more recently even terms like orgone. So Slim and Bill originally called these light life rings, and now you can kind of understand the background there. They discovered the work of a physicist whose name was John Wheeler. John Wheeler actually worked on the Manhattan Project, and he later coined the terms black hole, wormhole, and charge without charge. So Dr. Wheeler's papers were very interesting, and they revealed some interesting evidence for a tensor network that exists mathematically in the opening of any loop, regardless of what material it's made of. Now, Slim always felt that it was more than a mathematical expression, and he called this a tensor field. He suggested that it was partly the reason that a soapy liquid creates that thin film inside a loop. You know, children will play blow bubbles through the little loop, and the bubbles kind of hang in the loop, and Slim thought that they were actually kind of clinging to what he called the tensor field. So rings are now also referred to as tensor rings. Slim and Bill found that the rings had more of a paramagnetic quality than an electromagnetic or ferromagnetic quality. In fact, when it was eventually measured, the paramagnetic value was about 18,000 units, which was higher than anything that had been previously measured. Melanie and I suspect that the high paramagnetic value intrinsic in the rings is one of the ways and one of the reasons that they bring structure and coherence to water. But there are other dynamics involved too. The energetic field in and around a tensor ring has a number of different aspects. First of all, there is this toroidal flow that takes energy from the inside to the outside of the ring all the way around, just like what happens in a smoke ring or a water ring. And anytime you have a toroid, you also have opposing vortices from both ends coming here through the ring. And because of the vortices, there's torsion energy with a whole new set of dynamics. In Chapter 3 of the second edition of Dancing with Water, we discuss how these forces are the way the universe translates and communicates energy. Over the years, Slim and Bill gathered enough evidence for them to conclude that tensor rings were actually room temperature superconductors. And that takes us into a discussion of quantum physics, which is too much for this video. In the end, a number of factors and forces combine to accomplish three major things for water. First of all, tensor rings create a column of energy through the ring here that brings coherent organization to their area of influence, which is significant on either side of the ring. So for water, this means that they structure water. And then when placed on or around living tissues, they will often rebalance and set the stage for health and healing. Number two, tensor rings protect water from many forms of negative energy. This column actually works like a subtle shield against the influence of electromagnetic fields and other forms of negative energy. So cell phones, computers, microwaves, and this all depends on how close the water is inside a ring to these kinds of energies. But the tensor ring goes a long way to protect water from energetic influences. And third, tensor rings will focus energy. They can be used to add information to water. We talk about this in the book Dancing with Water too. And at the same time, each tensor ring, based on the length of wire that's used to create it, will resonate at its own specific frequency. And that's another discussion too for another video or another article. I keep tensor rings everywhere all over the house because no matter where I put a glass of water, I want it protected within the column, the energetic influence of a tensor ring. So I have tensor rings on my faucets, on my shower head, on my incoming water line, and even on the burners of my stove. And you can bet that if there's a sprained ankle in the house or an injured knee, that there will be a tensor ring. Smaller ones are available in that wrap while that injury is healing. Remember that tensor rings are tools, and you are the creator. Your influence is a part of the outcome. It's a bigger part of the influence than most people may realize. So there are other dynamics that come into play when you use more than one tensor ring together, and that is the subject of another video. So have fun with tensor rings and enjoy your dance with water.